Here we are, live,
Hello.
back again to speaking nonsense about the AC.
Exactly.
But I don't know. I think today's topic is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, for me too. I mean, I always go into these conversations with the idea that I'm actually going to learn something by kind of having an open mind, s- speaking with an opinion, and then, kind of challenging it. Sometimes saying things out loud is useful because you're just like, I said it out loud, and I'm like, do I really believe that? I think it's a good way to kind of like reinforce or shake up our thinking.
No, absolutely. And I'm sure that on this topic, there are a lot of things that we disagree. And I also feel that's really cool because it's interesting when somebody else thinks different to you and then they can explain why. um, Maybe at first I'm just going to say, all right, say
Go
whatever
for
you want, I'm not going to change my mind. But I think that keeps going around in your mind, and after a couple of days you're like, you know what, maybe Chris is right. That's why my mind works. I don't know yours.
it. So let's start. Let's just start. Should architects and engineers learn to code? Yes or no?
So it can only be yes or no. It
Go
cannot
for it. So let's
be.
just start. Let's just start with it. What's your position?
My position is no.
My position is yes.
Okay.
All right. So
Why do you think? Why? Let's start from there. Why do you think architects should learn, or AC professionals should learn how to code?
well, to be honest, I think everyone should learn to code. I think that learning to code teaches you how to think logically and how to do problem solving. Um, and I think it's a critical skill for everyone. So if I had my way, it would actually be the core curriculum for everyone, especially anyone in any of the sciences or engineering, what have you. I think it's a necessity to do that, and the earlier the better. I think there's too much lack of real clear thought. That's kind of my opinion.
I
What do you
mean,
think?
there are so many. There are so many things that might be really good for people, not only coding, right?
Well,
Uh,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and you're not pushing everybody to learn so many skills. Like everybody should learn how to cook or how to play sports, or like, I mean, there are so many things to learn. And for sure, I think it's useful. Don't get me wrong. I code and I love it,
Mm.
but I think it's overrated, man. Like there, and it's a problem because when you're saying like you need to learn how to code, for me, it's more important for people to learn how the how code process works than learning how to code,
Learn how the what process works.
how the coding process works. So if I'm an architect, for me it would be more useful to just understand how the process works so I can manage software developers and I don't have to learn how to do it, than actually uh, learning, going through a steep curve of learning a programming language. That's me.
Well, man, you just hit one of my like worst case scenarios, which is being managed by people who don't know what I do, and that's tough. That's really tough, uh, because then there's this huge mismatch where they have this illusion about what programming is, and they think, well, I don't actually need to know how to, but I just need to know how to manage you. But that aside, because I don't think that's really what we're talking about. When we talk about the process of coding, like, so I agree with that in the sense that I think people need to understand like how software is built, especially if they're in the industry of building software or using software. I think they need to understand some of that, like how do computers work. I think this idea that everyone's just going to magically figure it out as they go, like I think it should be taught. The other one is though the coding, coming back to the problem solving, learning to think logically. I think it needs to be part of the math curriculum. I think this idea of teaching everybody how to do derivatives is kind of pointless, or integrals and derivatives, when you have something really practically useful, which is problem solving, understanding the core of Boolean logic. Like you should know what your truth tables are. Everyone should know that. There's no reason not to know it. I mean, I think there's a whole segment of the population who doesn't have logic. That said, I noticed that a lot of actually engineers do get that. So the mechanical engineers get it, electrical engineers, and that they just transition naturally to coding because they had this, they understand the basics of, electrical routing and whatnot. It's just underneath all of that is computer science.
Yeah, but I mean, one thing I agree with you. One thing is learning logic. Another one is learning software programming language. It's not. It's
Yeah,
not the
and
same. I mean,
I agree with you. I don't think people need to know programming languages. I think you could just be a little bit just having a course in basic, you know, logic like programming, but actual
correct.
learning how to become really good at one language. I think that's kind of pointless. Like I don't think
Yeah,
anyone.
or exactly. Or I do feel that there is also something that I hate. I hate with my whole soul that it's people saying every architect should be a software developer.
Yeah.
Well, maybe some, but there are so many avenues. Like you could be a product owner. Like architects could be amazing pro. You could be a UX UI designer.
Oh yeah,
And you could be
100%.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many good avenues for architects, not just being software developers. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to be involved in the process. Because if you're a UI UX designer, for example,
Hmm.
you're going to contribute to a software, right? But
Yep.
you don't need to learn software developer. So that's my take. Like, I
Yeah, yeah,
mean,
I understand. I agree with that. Um, yeah, definitely not everybody needs to be a software developer. I mean, I think there's something to be said about learning the basics of algorithms and data structures, a little bit of that at the early stages in school. But really, is it something you need to master? No. Do you need to be a software developer? No. I will say you need to understand computers. I think, again, it's one of these things where sometimes people are out there with,
if
sorry,
you someone
I got
says,
this chat. It's on
yeah,
somebody said something.
yeah, if you want to code as an architect, you need to
Well,
go
okay,
all
then you
in.
guys, this is actually kind of a trigger for me. So one of the things I hate is this idea that somebody thinks that they can become, oh boy, Mary, this is the time to say it.
Just say
Can
it.
you be a professional software developer without any training whatsoever? Imagine this. We have somebody who says, well, you know what? I watched some YouTube videos and now I'm going to design a bridge. Do you really want to drive across that bridge designed by the person who just watched the YouTube videos or has been dabbling it on the side? They may have a degree in something else and they've studied something else for 4 years,
I
but did
mean,
they?
you can. I mean, I'm not sure about the comparison because
Hmm?
a bridge, there are safety concerns, right? So it's the same as if someone who's going to code, I don't know, a machine that is going to do heart surgery. Sure, I would never allow to be to a surgeon to use that machine if the guy who coded didn't have a lot of experience or it's a really well-known company. But if someone is just coding a AC viewer where I'm gonna visualize a model, I don't care. Imagine all the stuff that we use every day. We don't know shit if the developers behind it are good or not. We just know if the product is good or not, and that's the only thing we care about.
Yeah, I agree. But so let's just, it's interesting because an anecdote is that for a long time, any software that was really, let's say people's lives depended on, the software that was used for, air traffic, flight, so yeah, control systems and whatnot, they were designed by engineers who actually weren't studying computer science or software engineering. They were actually designed by mechanical engineers who learned coding on the side. And it was kind of a funny thing where the people who could create these really robust systems were actually engineers. Um, I don't know if that's really changed much because I don't think that software engineering, which whatever that means, people aren't really getting an education on proper risk assessment, risk management, requirements gathering, the things that are fundamental to engineering. So
Maybe it's
I'm
about
kind of contradicting myself a little bit here, but I'm just saying that there's a reality to the fact that these important systems that are mission critical are actually designed by engineers who learn to code.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, for me, it's always about purpose, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like, why do you want to learn how to code being an architect? Like, you
Yeah.
want to do it because you want to do things faster? Sure, maybe you don't need to learn how to code. You can maybe just learn Dynamo, for example, if you want to, or
Yeah.
Grasshopper, if you want to automate things and do a little bit. You want to do it because you want to actually have your own startup. You want to build products for the industry. Yeah, you might want to have to learn how to code, and that I agree with Julio that you need to go all in. Like, if you're actually gonna build, it's not the same if you're going to do stuff for quick stuff experimentation or processing on your architectural or engineering project than
Mhm.
if you want to build software and sell tools out there. If you're going to do it professionally, I do feel that it's going to take you a while to do it.
And that's
I
my
don't
point.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that going all in, I agree with it. If you want to go in, go all in. Just don't have the illusion that taking a few weeks of training is the same as somebody who studied it for the 4 years. And I mean, when you come out of a computer undergraduate science undergraduate degree, you've only scratched the surface of what there is to learn. There's a lot to learn.
What do you
Now,
think
yeah.
about? I just have one really good one for you. What do you think about, because now with LLMs, right? And
Hmm.
not even LLMs, like code compilers like Cursor and these amazing code
Hmm.
compilers that can even code a whole program with a single line of text, right?
Hmm.
You don't think that's changing anything?
Oh yeah, yeah. Big time is changing things. Um. So I guess the problem I see for people going partially in the way in and whatnot, like you said, there's nothing wrong with it. If that's your purpose and that's what you want to achieve, that's great. And I think you just have to understand the limitations of your education, your experience, and your tools. There are limits to what it can do, and sometimes people they kind of extrapolate, say, "Oh, I've did this far, and now I can do that." And I was like, "Well, not necessarily." It's the same thing with LLMs. Like they can go a certain distance, they just can't take you all the way. So they're great for certain types of coding. I use uh, ChatGPT extensively in my work, and actually, it's really interesting because it's critical for me because there's areas that I don't have a lot of domain knowledge. Let's say, for example, rendering APIs, and it's got like a massive database and knowledge base, and it helps me to teach myself and to build code that's specialized, let's say in OpenGL and whatnot. So yeah, I think these are great tools and they're changing things. I think you really want to get the most out of it. Having some education can help a lot and go a long ways because you need to be able to kind of think bigger and understand what it's producing, how to improve it, how to guide it down the right paths, integrate it into a larger software system. I guess my the trigger for me was that software engineering at scale is hard, and that's something that you agree with. It's like you want to do large scale software development, you're going to need to make a significant investment in time and energy into learning that, and you're even after a degree and several years of work experience, you still have a long ways to go.
Yeah, and I mean it's I feel it's getting easier and easier to produce software. Like
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it
now
is.
I
Yeah.
code 10 times faster than what it used to be like
Hmm.
8 years or 10 years ago. It's just insane. And
Yeah.
and I do feel it's really good for stuff that people have done over and over again. Like
Hmm.
if you like
Yeah.
try to use Cursor, for example, and say, hey, I want to just a landing page, and can you just change the color of the bottom, or can you do so many
Mhm.
like basic stuff? It's really good.
Yeah.
Um, the problem I think it gets when you want to do something specific that nobody has ever done or nobody has ever documented out there, because that's the thing. LLMs are not going to generate new, like something that nobody ever generated at least once. So I feel, and it even happened to me with the Revit API, which we could see that there are thousands of Revit add-ins out there that I try to do really specific stuff, and sometimes ChatGPT or Claude cannot solve it.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's
I
sometimes
mean,
where you need to
we're
give it.
still there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully, that changes. I think that it's going to change.
Well, to a degree, but I think the idea there's a kind of a just people are misusing it. Not that there's any problem using it. It's just that people are the expectation is unreasonable. Like you said, out of the box, even one line, it's not going to start with something creative. Can you guide it towards creating a creative solution? Oh heck yeah! And what I find is great is actually giving it prompts and having discussions with it about certain ideas that I have, and letting it hammer at my ideas. It is like it is an analysis system as well, and it can, with the right guidance, go down these paths. It's just that I think what happened is that certain things are so easy, and we want everything to be that easy, and that's not going to happen. Not in the near
Hmm,
future. I don't want to say anything
I
about
mean,
slightly longer term, 5, 10 years from now. It's going to be bonkers. Coding, it's true. It has become more and more easy and more accessible as time goes on. And it's just going to continue so. There, we are on a brand new path. Everything's different now.
uh,
Languages are going to be designed differently. Libraries are going to be designed differently. Tools are going to be designed. I'm designing my libraries in a different way. I'm even making technology choices because, well, this is going to work better with ChatGPT, which I require now. So in order to maximize my time, I kind of these all feed into each other.
no, it's. I feel it's going like everything is going to change, even infrastructure. Like I remember that no long ago when you have to deploy something with a database and a website and like it you need to have a lot of knowledge, right, to deploy
Mhm.
everything on Amazon and make it reliable and robust. Nowadays there are new platforms that you don't even deploy anything, and everything that you're coding is being coded online and gets deployed automatically. and
Mm.
and for me that's a really big change, and I think the same is going to happen with APIs. The same is going to happen with even desktop solutions.
Yeah.
uh, and for me it's going to be soon. I don't think it's going to be a couple of years. I think it's going to be next year at the most.
Interesting.
I mean, everything is going so fast, man. Like
Yeah.
this week, we tried deploying DeepSeek on a laptop, on my laptop, which is not a really good laptop, and it worked. It worked. Almost break my computer because everything was running so slow, but I was able to run extremely powerful LLM and do it locally.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. Imagine this implemented to games or to add-ins where you automatically just ask for stuff and it gets implemented. We're not
Mm.
there yet, true, but eventually it's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I agree.
but anyway, what do you think about, being that said, what do you think about the difference between an architect who's doing scripting than an architect who's coding? You think it's the same? Do you think
Well,
sometimes people think they're coding, but they're just scripting?
well, it's funny. Yeah. I think sometimes what happens is there's kind of this classism. Like, oh, I remember people saying, "Oh, I'm a scripter, but I'm not a coder." Some people, I'm a coder, not a scripter. I'm like, it's the same thing." Sometimes software engineers suffer from the fact that they're like, "Oh, I'm going to write all this in C++," and it's like, dude, that was a one-line Bash script. Oh, sorry, a shell script. And the people who were more hacker oriented and less formally trained sometimes were more efficient. And in fact, I see this a
Hmm.
lot. I see a lot of people who are just they're constrained to be more creative in the tools they use and are more they don't necessarily know all of the details of software. They'll tend to be more creative and find solutions that are
Hmm.
less heavyweight, and it's amazing. I'm like inspired by that. Sometimes I remember one of my colleagues telling me, yeah, I showed him my library. He's like, "Oh, dude, I would have wrote that with a macro in Emacs, an old editor." I'm like, "Well, that's cheating, but why not?" I knew people, like I said, I knew people who learned how to use old command line tools and would accomplish tons of things. Um, so I think that sometimes people who are focused more on software engineering overlook the power of scripting, of using the tools available. You were alluding to this before. It's purpose driven. Like if there's a tool that you can just use off the shelf, let's do it. Let's use that tool. You don't have to write a new solution from scratch. And software engineers like to create things from scratch, but that's fine.
Sure, we all. I mean, I have done that so many times.
Me
Like
too. We
just
enjoy
trying
it.
to yeah, and it's something wrong. Like I work for companies and it try to do something because I just want to do it from scratch instead of maybe just purchasing a software out there. Like and I've learned it the bad way, right? But that's really interesting. And I think that's really truth that sometimes the best ideas, it's not always, right? Like sometimes the best ideas comes from people that they don't have a clue or don't know how to code. They just know the problem really well, and they know what the solution is. Maybe they
Yeah.
don't know how to implement it, but and that's typically what happens in our industry. Sometimes I see architects or engineers that have really smart and creative ideas, and I speak with them. I'm like, I never thought about that.
Yep.
Like you end up being more constrained and more structured to just coding. And I mean, if you love that, it's not a problem at all. But it's again circling back about the purpose. And I also hate when I don't know. I love business, so I hate when people say become a software developer because being an architect you're gonna lose money. I used to be an architect and now I code and I'm more handsome and I get a lot of money. But for me, that's stupid. That's stupid. Like if you just want to make money, you can still be an architect and add more value to your profession.
Mhm.
Sure, coding it's one way, but it's not the only way, and you need to make sure you like it. Because what's the purpose on coding if you don't like it? Like me, for
Yeah.
example, I'm really bad at design. I suck at it. That's why I don't do design as an architect. It's the truth. I'm really bad at it. And I when I see guys, architects designing, for me, it's like, oh man, you're so smart. How can you do that? And for me, it's more about, hey, you want to make more money? I think it's more of a business decision on how you can add more value doing what you love, but not just trying to code because it's going to give you more money. I think you're going to be miserable and most likely not a good developer if you don't like it.
Well, that's kind of where I'm getting to earlier. Is like you're becoming a good, programmer coder. It takes years and years of experience. You've got to have like a solid background and a lot of work experience. Too often I encounter people, sure, they're smart and they're solving problems, but then you look at what they're doing and I'm like, dude, you're just repeating the same problems, like solving solved problems, if that makes sense. Like they're just reinventing the wheel and they're very proud of it. And they're like, hey, look at the wheel I invented. I'm like, yeah, so like, I think that there's people need to work together more. I think what happens sometimes I see a whole group of people who are just like, well, they've only got one area of expertise and they refuse to listen to the people on the other side. And whether that's the areas, people that have the subject matter expertise, understand the workflows, or the people that understand software architecture and could say, yeah, you're going down the wrong path. But at the same time, like there's more and more coders every year. And I'm starting to realize that I really am this cranky old minority that actually has just been doing it for 30 years. And I feel like a few things are obvious. I mean, well, it took me a long time to get here, and there's not many of us around. Sometimes they graduate to upper management. They don't want to code
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
Lose track
Well,
of tech. Yeah.
I mean, it's stressful sometimes, but
But
things
yes.
things are changing, and I also feel that for me it's a unicorn also to just to encourage people who want to be developers as well when you have someone who understands our business really well because our industry is really complex and there are so many things that are so different from other industries, like 3D. Like most software developers, professional software developers, they don't know 3D.
Yeah.
They don't think in 3D, um, and or they might not be used as a large data sets like
Mhm.
we are in our industry. So I think those guys, I feel they're unicorns sometimes when they know the business really well, and they are also architects or engineers, and they also code.
Yeah.
They're not that many, but I think those guys are amazing. And startups or companies that have them are really lucky because they can speak to both sides, right? They can speak to upper management about what they're going to do and how they're going to solve it and express in a way that they understand for the business.
Hmm.
They can also speak with software developers and tell them, you know what, we're going to do this infrastructure and we're going to use this programming language, and you have to do it this, and that, and explain them to there. But what do you think? It's easier to teach an architect or someone from the AC to code, or to teach the industry to a software developer?
It's easier to teach architects to code. Yep.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm, you mentioned all these things that are hard to learn, and it's true. Even as a software developer, it's like you get down a rabbit hole of learning a whole bunch of things, but and there's still a ton more to learn. Like I learned 3D relatively late in my career. I learned how compilers work. I learned different languages, and there's still these gaps, these huge like technical gaps. And like I said, 3D, there's like 3D math and geometry, and then there was like rendering, and I'm only recently learning how to do rendering. I only scratch the surface of databases and web services. There's so much stuff, and it's like
Yeah.
never ending. So you're never really an expert programmer. I mean, you're always just like, I'm just juggling, shuffling around stuff. Now, but the point I want to get to is that, um, now if I wanted to learn the industry, well, first off, most people that are programmers don't actually have an interest in learning about the domain. Like, if they just start off with a software engineering background, computer science, it's really hard to open up other topics to them because they just like code, they like programs, they like algorithms, they like git pushing and pulling and code reviews, and that's it. And anything else, as soon as you talk, they say they want to be involved in business. As soon as you include them, they just shut down. They just eyes roll over in the back of their heads. They don't want to talk to customers. I mean, I think it's good to try and find people like that. If you're building a business, you want people that are open-minded and interested. Now, coming back to the other side, the architects and engineers who are learning to code, well, they understand the problem domain, and if they're willing to put the energy in, they can learn to code and solutions. I just think they just need to be realized that there's a point in which they're learning and what their self-taught stuff they can do, and the limited time they have, like they're not going to go beyond a certain point. Like, I've seen maybe this is more for our next conversation about startups and the mistakes they make. But I'll just say, observing the AEC industry, all of these great startups started by people whose first degree wasn't in programming, and they're successful. They're building successful startups, and I'm just like,
There.
power to you, folks. I'm just jaw drops. I go to AEC hackathons. I'm surrounded by engineers and architects and people coding and solving problems. And I'm like, wow, you guys are amazing. So
No, absolutely. And sure, we're not gonna do spoilers about our next conversation, but it's a reality, and I think you need the right balance, because, like, if you're gonna start your own company and you really know well the AC, and let's say you know how to code, that's perfect. Yeah, you can be a solopreneur and start doing your own thing, but eventually you will reach a point where you need to focus on the business, and then let somebody else do something more robust and scalable so you can sell it to other people. And typically it's that way, because most likely you have a unique skill, which is understanding both sides, and it's more important for you to sell and do the business part because you understand the AC. Then the other way around, you're not going to find another person exactly like you that understands it, but you're going to find for sure a software developer from a different industry that can hop in and do something extremely scalable.
yeah,
Um, but that not always happens. And I've
no.
seen the good, the
And they
bad, and
sometimes
the
will over
ugly.
engineer things as well too, because they make the wrong assumptions. And I think that's a really that's the important thing to realize, is that you actually need to explore a space of possibilities, and you need to do that as a group. I think
Sure.
too often everybody, whether you're experienced or not, they tend to to go down one path because that's the one they're most comfortable with, or the first thing that occurred to them. And the reality is you need to explore the space of possibilities and not be afraid to try something and then back away and try something else. It
Yeah,
takes
or
a
not
lot of
being.
humility.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really hard, right? It's really hard, and you get in love with your product, and you want to do it perfect, and you get
Yeah.
ambitious. But I think you get greedy. That's the biggest mistake when building software, because
Yeah.
even if you come from the AC and you work for a company, or you want to build your own product, whatever, I think you want to start really small. Like even if the vision is huge, like I want to do. I've heard so many times that I want to do the next rabbit. Sure, you want to do the next rabbit, but you're not gonna do it overnight. That's hell of a job. But you can start with something really small, extremely small, that adds value right away, and people can start using that, and then you can scale your solution, right? And I've suffered this so many times and done it myself. Code something, and even an internal company, right? Code something, trying to implement it with my coworkers, and then implementation fails. Implementation fails, not because the product is bad or because the implementation process is wrong. It's just because it might be something too big for them to implement, and they don't have time. But if you start with something small and you get them involved in the process, that's completely different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny. We're coming back to the same theme about working together, having people involved. I think too. The other thing I heard earlier, which I wanted to respond to, was the idea of knowing how to code. We do we ever achieve is there I'm good enough? Like I actually know how to code. I don't know how to code. Like I said, there's so many gaps in my knowledge. There's so many areas of improvement. We all have that. I think knowing some code can be very powerful, and you can use that, and you can use that as part of your career, and you can go down the paths of architects who code or computational designers. Where I'm going with that
True.
is that um, just don't overestimate or what you know. I guess don't underestimate what you don't know. That's one of the problems. It's not what you know you don't know. It's what you don't know that's going to get you. You know what I'm saying?
True. No, no, absolutely. The first time I started to try to learn how to code, I was like, it was a problem because there was no path. There was no clear path on how to start or what to learn, or I don't know. For me, it was a really bad decision on how I did it. I feel nowadays there are places that you can decide at least, like, hey, I want to be a front end developer and I just want to do front end, or I want to do Revit add-ins. What should I need for that?
Mm,
And it's a more clear path, and you just do that. You don't do, and at least that would allow you to create your own products. Kerry
yeah.
said, where is the balance between actually undertaking architectural work and going down the rabbit hole, or becoming involved in coding?
Rabbit holes, man. Yeah, that's one of the things about coding is that there are a lot of rabbit holes. You're like, why do something manually in an hour when I could spend a week automating it? And that's sometimes I think that comes from a passion for automation. Uh, I say frequently follow your passion. Like if that's just what you're passionate about, go do it. And if you're trying to make business decisions about it, well, it's really tough because again, it comes back to our emotions, right? Uh, I don't know anything about architecture. Let's be honest. I don't know what's involved in architecture, like proper design.
Wait, you work at Autodesk, so you cannot say that.
I know a lot about software architecture, not about architecture. No, I mean, I've worked with people who try to explain it to me, but what is the experience of actually sitting in an architectural firm and marking up those things and creating schedules and tagging your rooms? It sounds pretty horrible.
I mean, no, I mean, for me, I think it's besides the passion. Let's say that we we don't care about feelings, and we don't care about um, if you like it or not. Let's say that we leave that
Okay.
aside.
All right.
I think it's a combination of factors that, like, if you do coding, and besides the fact that you can get an upgrade in your career, because it's a reality.
Mm.
Typically, you make more money on the technical side. On the technical, I went, you went down the rabbit hole years ago. I hope you're having a happy life and you don't regret it, Kerry. But it's good to know. You can tell us what you think about also, Kerry. But for me, besides all that, it's about a business decision, I guess.
Mm.
Is like in taking the right decision of, I want to automate this and save a lot of time and save a lot of money, or add more value to the designs that we're doing at our company. For me, it's just about that. If I'm thinking on a business
Yeah.
perspective, is, hey, I want to add value here and save time and save money, or make better processes. For me, it's just that. I don't know if somebody else has different experience implementing code.
Well, I agree with that, and I think there is a lot of value, and I mean I've seen where people can really make a big difference looking for opportunities to automate things using Dynamo, PyRevit, Grasshopper, and exploring ways that you can improve your workflow via automation and scripting and coding or plugins, whatever tools you can find. But you've got that curiosity, pursue it, go for it, pursue it. And I think being self-taught, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, go ahead, do that. In fact, getting a 4-year degree is not going to help you in that. It's like actually going to make it harder for you because you're going to think everything's a software engineering problem. It's not. Sometimes it's an automation problem or a workflow problem. So I kind of want to emphasize how much I agree with you, Valentin. It's about uh, finding opportunities to add value to your workflow, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. And I love what you said about tools, because for me, programming is just another tool.
Yeah.
And it's like a hammer. You only use hammers when you have nails, right? Um, and the same applies to programming. It's like, why on earth would you do some, I don't know, table in a database when you have Excel, for example, and you want to solve, I don't know, a simple table calculation? And sometimes it's worth it just to use Excel. Sometimes it might be worth to just use Revit,
Hmm.
but some other times might be used to use Dynamo, and some others is like, you know what, we try to implement this, and I've seen it many times, is trying to implement it at scale, right, on a big firm, Dynamo, right? And that's hard because it needs so much maintenance. It's hard to tell people how to run it, or make it flexible to any type of
Hmm.
situation. It's not robust, right? And in those cases, it's like, hey, you don't have the option. You might have to create a tool like a Revit add-in or something to do this process if you want to implement it at scale.
Hmm.
So again, there it's a tool, and inside programming there are so many tools, and I think it's key just to understand what tool do you need,
Yeah.
and sometimes for that you need certain knowledge. That's true. I need
Yeah.
to give you that.
Yeah. So I think it's like if you're no, I still say if you're interested in it and you want to save things, just I guess where we both also agree is like going down the route of becoming a software developer for becoming a software developer, and for saying I've got a good salary and I'm a software developer now, even though my degree was in architecture. You've got gaps. You've got big honking gaps in your education that you need to reassess, and you need to be aware of them. There's nothing wrong with that. Just don't overestimate yourself or oversell your value, because yeah, you could get a harsh wake up call when you go try to work in a certain firm. Oh, I
Yeah,
want to see what Kerry's saying now. He says,
it's
after
good.
50 years, the first 10 were architecture and the rest were coding. A lot of auto Lisp and automation focused on adding value and effectiveness to workflows. And AI is helping. And that sounds to me like a great career. And I think that's really a valid way to go. There's nothing wrong
a,
with that.
a brave man actually to do auto Lisp. When
He's
yeah,
he's
when
old.
.NET
I
was
am.
not available for AutoCAD. Yeah, remember that? Like you had to do everything autolivs. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
you
yeah.
had to go into the forums. It was tough.
It is.
Nowadays, it's much more easier.
But it comes back to the point I made at the very beginning of our talk, which was there's room for understanding computation. I think is another way of phrasing it. Understand processes, algorithms, and automation. I think that's a very useful thing, and I think a lot of people could benefit from it. I can't force anyone to do it, but I think understanding the basics of that are super valuable without becoming, oh, I'm a front end developer, I'm a web app developer. You don't need to go down all of that garbage, not garbage, but all of that stuff just to start finding ways to automate things and to think computational. Because some of the, you know, good, I've learned this actually. That's what I don't know anything about architecture. I know a few things. One is that a good architectural design is almost computational in nature. There is a chain of connections. When you understand the constraints and the requirements and how the one parameters affect the other, you can come up with a better Revit model in the end than somebody who doesn't understand all of these connections. So thinking computationally can influence the effectiveness of your design. I've seen it even in 3D art, like the chain of actions you perform at the beginning can allow you to make better, more robust designs in the end. Do you agree with me or not?
No, I do agree with that, and I tend to think that nowadays, like LLMs are just or mostly seen on the realm of language, right? Text and language.
Hmm.
But I do think that going to your point, that eventually we're gonna get to a point where LLMs are gonna be mixed with 3D and design as well.
Hmm.
Like it's like the Meta CTO was saying, I think it was last week, that LLMs there is a limitation because as humans, if you take all the knowledge in bytes that LLMs ingest to be automated, to be trained, sorry, that's the word. Um, the thing is like you need 100 lives to read the whole thing, but toddlers get that same information visually in just the span of 3 or 4 years, if you count it in bytes. So, uh, I do think the same is going to apply where LMs are going to evolve in a way that is just not going to be text. That is going to be also visual, and there is also going to be 3D. Nowadays, it sucks. It's just meshes that look kind of good. That's it, but not parametric stuff. But once we get to that point, I think the door is going to be open for not only architects to design buildings and do things that we have never imagined in do it real fast like we do nowadays with code. The same thing is going to happen with architecture.
Yeah,
So I think it's going to blend, and we're going to be able to accomplish that because like you said, it's a programmatic thing.
I'm excited now. I just like I want to go code that right now, right away, because I have a vision of how that can work and how we could use AIs to help us generate designs more effectively. And it has a lot to do with encoding of information, as you suggested. So much of what we do is actually encode information in a way that makes it flexible. And for me, that's the basis of compute. It's the basics of math, of computation, and of design. There's language and there's code in design. There's code in design. Um, Gary says another really interesting point, and I think we should
Mm,
highlight this. He says being a generalist is helps adaptability and survival, and
mm,
that is really true. I mean, because what happens is you get more transferable skills. You do add more value to yourself within an organization. I know that people who I've heard people time and time again within their either engineering or architecture firms, they learn to code a bit and they become indispensable. People start. I started to like sometimes they get pigeonholed and they're like, I'm just a developer now. No one even will let me design. But is there anything wrong with that? No, that's a useful thing. You've made yourself valuable. And I mean, they don't have sometimes the bandwidth or the interest in hiring somebody from who's got, let's say, a professional software training background. Like I just no architectural firm would hire me because my background is too much software focused. They want somebody who's got that mix. So the other thing I'll say is that mixing two things together is always super valuable. Is when I tell my kids, I said, look, take one thing and take another thing that you like and mix them up, and you're going to be, man. I started my career at Autodesk as a tech writer who codes. Okay, such a thing exists. Yeah, and it gave me a wonderful career. For a few years, and I had a lot of fun because I was what they called a programming writer. We didn't even know the thing existed, but well-paid job. It was comfortable. I enjoyed it. Yeah, so mixing two things together, whatever they may be, is good. But like you said,
Well,
doesn't have
I
to be a
mean,
developer.
as long as it's not a restaurant and getting a haircut at the same time or something like that, that sometimes will not will not go together. But I'm just saying, sometimes there are bad mixes.
If there's some, yes, yes.
I'm going
I
off
don't
the
want.
rave here. I'm going
Yeah,
off
yeah.
the
Hair,
rave
hair of my
here, and
lasagna.
we're
We
almost
should
on time.
we should just
But
end it there. Okay.
yeah, yeah, we're just with the
Haircuts
restaurant
in
and the haircut.
restaurants are a
Yeah,
bad mix.
yeah,
Which
until
was
proven otherwise. Yeah, but but before we leave, like next week, we have worked with so many startups, both of us, in
yeah,
for sure we're not gonna say names or anything like that, but we're gonna open the hood on what we have seen out there on what are good and bad practices for startups. And I think it's gonna be really interesting to also see why some startups have made it, some others don't, and discuss the topic from a technical perspective and also from a business perspective. So
yeah,
if you're for all the ones who are listening out there, uh, next chapter is going to be about that, and it's going to be interesting about the good, the bad, and the ugly of AC startups, at least from our experience.
yeah, yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I think there'll be some tie-ins to today's conversation as well. I think.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Chris, for being such a nice nice person. It's nice to discuss with a Canadian. And thanks so much, Terry. Kerry, you were our star today. Thanks for all your contributions.
Yeah,
We
yeah. We
always love when
appreciate that.
people, yeah, contribute and give us their experience. So hope everybody have a lovely the rest of the day. All right.
All right. Thanks so
Okay.
much.
Bye
Talk to you again
bye.
soon. Bye bye.